Welcome to Coming About with David Paragamian, the podcast that dives deep into the minds of leaders who have transformed their businesses and industries, paving the way for a better future. Here's Dave.
Welcome back to my conversation with Dan DiVito. Dan is a seasoned marketing leader who's held the chief marketing officer role in both large and small pharma companies and has a track record of launching successful brands. Dan, in part one, we talked about some of your career pivots that included moving from a large organization to a smaller one. I'd love to talk about those cultural differences that you've observed in one company to another, the large company to the small company. How important do you think this culture element is? And I think particularly for a listener thinking about, hey, do I want to work for this company or do I want to work for that company? Is culture a fair thing for people to consider as one of the key elements when they think about where they want to put themselves?
Yes. I think it's critical. I view it very differently at a small organization versus a large organization. In big pharma, I'd been through, like anyone who's worked in big pharma, all sorts of culture initiatives. And I think as I moved on, I honestly became a lot more focused on just the culture of my team, trying to fix the culture of a company of 100,000. Maybe the CEO can do it, but I even question that. It's so big, it's so hard. And a lot of people's experience isn't what HR puts out or the videos on the intranet. It's their direct manager and maybe that person's manager. So I spent a lot more time focusing on the culture of my team and what the day-to-day working environment for me and for the people who worked for me was, versus worrying so much about the corporate culture. Now going to a small company, the team almost is everybody's the team. Like it was shocking to get to Lucira, and there were a lot of meetings where the entire company was on them, and they weren't town halls. There just weren't that many people. So if it's an important topic, everyone's going to be there. So I think it was exciting to be able to have more of a direct influence on the company culture, just because by nature of how small it was, and it also realizing that it played an even bigger role than it already did in my hiring decisions, because in a company of 30, 40 people, a commercial team of only 5 or 6 that's building, one bad hire could throw off the whole vibe of the organization. So I spent a lot more time in the interview process worried about fit. Is this person going to like us? Are we going to like them? Are we all going to get, are they going to be easy to work with? Being aware of that it would be hard to recover from a toxic hire.
I want to grab a couple of the threads of what you said. One was that you were focused on your team, your department, not trying to change the whole company. And I think that that's such a great message for people, that changing culture, changing the environment, the vibe, you don't have to start with this aspiration that you're going to change the whole world. You're just going to change the garden around you. And I think that that's a really great, finite, reasonable sort of visual headset for people to say, okay, here's what I can control and here's how I'll change this. And then the piece you said there at the end that I totally agree with, which is a toxic hire, to use your words, boy, it matters so much. And I don't know about you, but early on in my career, I definitely worked in companies where there were individuals that everybody knew, well, he or she is a really difficult person and they may treat people a certain way, but gosh, they're so brilliant. And later on in my career, when I got to be in more decision-making roles, I realized, you know what? I'm not going to hire those kind of people. And if we find them, we're going to help them move on to something else, because to your point, it's a petri dish, whether it's 5 people, 500 people, or 5,000 people. And if you knowingly have something that is, as you say, toxic to the environment, harmful to others, real problem, right?
Absolutely. None of us are so brilliant that we can't be replaced. And if the cost to other people's experience at work is high, it's not worth it.
Yeah. No, I think culture matters so much. I think about all the organizations that I've been a privilege to be part of, and the highest performing organizations were one where there really was this sort of a healthy culture. Not perfect. I always wince a little when I hear people say, oh, we're like a family, because I think, well, I've got a family and we've got certainly some issues, but I do think that high-performing cultures are ones where there are clear expectations, there's good communication, there's good opportunity for people to advance, and that we've extracted out favoritism. We've extracted out, as they say, the brilliant jerk, because corporate culture or the individual team culture, to me, is the ultimate measure of success. I certainly know at the company that I work at now, the financial folks at the board level want to hear about the hard KPIs, the number. They want to hear about revenue. They want to hear about profit. They want to hear about new clients that were sold, new products that were launched. But to me, all of those things are an outcome of, we got the culture right. You get the people right. And then those other things follow. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. 100% agree.
I want to take the listener to the next chapter, because a marvelous career that started out 17 plus years ago at Sanofi, all the way to the top job as the chief marketing officer, this purposeful pivot to get into an entrepreneurial organization where you were the fourth commercial employee, building this culture, building this organization, leveraging your strengths, learning new things, hiring somebody that had worked at a brewery to work for you in a pharmaceutical biotech environment, which I think is a brave and courageous and smart decision. But right now you're in the midst of another courageous pivot. So whatever you did to burnish that courage muscle for making change, you've clearly done a great job, because let's talk a little bit about it. You're in the middle of another pivot, right?
Yeah, this one's a doozy and I have no idea where it's going. So I appreciate you welcoming me on the Pivot podcast when I don't know, mine doesn't have a clear aim yet. But so this company, Lucira, that I went to, amazing experience. If I had 100 opportunities to redo that decision, I would do it again 100 times. It ended with a bankruptcy. Number of reasons, which is a whole nother podcast episode if we wanted to get into it, but it didn't work out. The company grew, had some early success, things started to go sideways, and then earlier this year we went into bankruptcy. So there was a series of layoffs, one of which I left during. That was cool. It was different. Not exactly sure what I want to do next. So let me take some time off, which in itself was a scary decision to think I'm going to be just unemployed for a while, kind of searching. But I knew I needed to let myself do this. So I didn't jump into something else without being sure it was what I wanted. About 6 weeks into being unemployed, a former colleague, a friend, called me from a different big pharma company they were evaluating diagnostics companies, which I now had experience with. So they brought me on as a part-time consultant to kind of help them with that process. It was a nice way to kind of keep my foot in the door, keep some basic employment while still having a little bit more free time to explore my options. And that actually ended on Friday. My decision, because I do want to really dedicate myself to just having time off, clearing my head, and figure out what I want to do next. So actually a few months ago decided me and my wife and our 3 little boys, we're going to rent an RV and drive around the country for 3 weeks. Actually, it's going to be almost a month. So I stopped my consulting. We leave in a week and a half. And what more fitting way and maybe cliche way to clear your mind than to just hop in an RV and drive around the country. So that's the next step that's clear to me, is the RV trip, which I'm super excited about. And then after that, I plan to not work for the rest of the summer and really dedicate myself to explore what's going to make me happy, what's going to fulfill me into the future. My kids are one of the reasons we're doing the RV trip, but also I think about this when I think about my career. My kids are 5, 7, and 9. And my wife and I talk about it all the time. We're in this sweet spot where they're old enough that they kind of appreciate the things that we do. They appreciate being around us. They're just fun, but they're also not so old that they still like us and they still think we're cool and want to be around us. So if we could freeze time right now, we would, and keep them this age. But at the same time, it's like, okay, I could go back to working 60 hours a week and then, seeing them at dinner and probably being too exhausted to enjoy it. And then maybe we have fun weekends or a fun 2 weeks off. But it's like, why am I saving money to retire when they don't live with us anymore? And maybe we're not as healthy as we are today to do the things we want to do. It's like, could I do a mini retirement now in my 40s? When I'm at this peak moment of fulfillment in my personal life? Yes, it's scary. Yes, I'll blow through some of the money I've saved over the years and have to recover from that later. But what better time? So these are I'm bouncing all over the place, but it illustrates kind of where my head's at right now. I am bouncing all over the place between what do I want to do to do I want to do nothing for a little while. So yeah, that's the pivot I'm looking at right now. First things first is enjoy this road trip, enjoy the summer when the kids are home and my wife is home because she works at their school. And then come September, I'll have to make some big decisions.
I love that story. And I actually think, with the benefit of a little bit of the perspective that you as the protagonist in the story don't have, I think that the pivot is similar to the first big pivot to leave the big company for the small company, right? Because it's about having the confidence to know it's going to be okay. I think that's a great lesson for so many people, to know that there are a handful of things that are truly life and death. And there are terrible moments that people and families face in hospital emergency rooms and places like that, where you don't get to make a choice and you don't get to make a pivot and something is thrust upon you. And I understand, and I unfortunately know about that, et cetera. But I do think that in our personal lives, and particularly here talking about our careers, we get to captain our own ship. And you can do it with, as you said, the confidence that to make the move from the big company to the small company, knowing that you didn't know everything, knowing that there were going to be some learning moments, some challenging moments, but hey, I can do this. I can fill up my confidence gas tank and I can do this. And a similar one now to say, okay, I can take a look at something that was a bankruptcy story, that very few people would start a story about bankruptcy and end with confidence and excitement and the future. But I totally think that's the right way to think about it, that it's hard to call the bankruptcy a gift, but in some ways it's a gift. It forces you to lean into the pivot, to be able to embrace this time with your family. I really like it. And it tells me that when you get back from being the CEO of the RV trip, I am confident that the next chapter, the next pivot, is going to be equally as exciting. And what I'm really curious about is what that will be, because it may or may not be a linear pharma, biotechnology sort of decision based on the sounds of what I'm hearing in your voice. But I do know that whatever it is, it'll be a successful one. That part comes through loud and clear.
Yeah, well, thanks, Dave. I appreciate the vote of confidence there. And I think, that is definitely on my mind. If I had to say right now, I don't think it's going to be in pharma or in healthcare. Where it's going to go, I don't exactly know. I know I love marketing. I like, and if you broaden marketing, just influencing people to make positive decisions for their own health and happiness, which I'm trying to figure out what decisions I need to make right now for my own health and happiness. And once I get there, maybe I'll discover, hey, this is something I want to evangelize and convince other people to do. Another thing I just wanted to throw out there related to the points you just made, these pivots are scary. And sometimes they're forced upon you and it's how you look at them. Sometimes they're your decision, which both are in your story in the book. And I think both are in my story that I've told today. I know for me, and I consider myself not to be, it's funny, I think all of us think of us that we're not that influenced by what we see around us and not that gullible. And then when you have to make a tough decision, you realize, like, I want other people to have done this exact thing to tell me it's going to be okay. When I first thought, okay, Lucira is going bankrupt, I'm going to leave and I'm going to take some time off, I started searching for people who had taken hiatuses in their career to just tell me it was okay, tell me that it's survivable and that I'm going to be able to get a job when it's over. And it was harder than I thought it was going to be. And I had a lot of people actually tell me, no, you don't want a gap in your resume. Don't do it. Just take something. There was a lot more of those than there were of people who were like, yeah, I did it. It was great. This is what it did for me. Fortunately, I chose to only listen to those few people versus all of the people who told me not to do it. I realize now I was looking in the wrong place. So this second time around was like, okay, I'm going to stop the consulting project. I'm going to drive around the country in an RV and then figure it out. Instead of just going to my friend network and people I know at work who clearly have similar experiences and have been in similar environments to me, I went to TikTok, and I was actually ended up on TikTok because it was like, I just need to see people who have done these RV trips and tips and tricks and, how do I not spill black water all over my shoes on the trip, those kind of things. But what I found was there are so many people who've taken much more extreme leaps than me, for various reasons. They got tired of their career and they decided to sell their house and all their property and possessions and travel around the country in RV for the rest of their lives, and or start homesteading and growing their own food and building a farm. And it just, I think for me, it was like I found a little bit of like, okay, people have taken this way, way further than I'm even considering, and they're fine. Everyone, to the points that you're making, you don't know where it's going to go. You could dwell on the potential ways it could go wrong to talk yourself out of anything. But for me, it was interesting how just broadening where I looked for confidence actually made this bigger decision to just really take the whole summer off, and even consider taking an extended period of time off while my kids and family are in this sweet spot. It actually feels less scary than just moving from one big healthcare company to a small healthcare company felt just over a year ago.
I totally agree. And I think the takeaway that I'm hearing is perspective matters, right? Because if you just look to your left and your right at people who are exactly like you, that have gone to the same schools you went to, live in the same neighborhood that you live in, work in the same industry that you work in, you may get a very different answer than when you pick your head up, and certainly not suggesting that all life decisions should be based on an N out of TikTok, but it's a good metaphor for getting a larger perspective than just my neighbor on the left, my neighbor on the right, and the brand manager down the hall. It does allow a person to say, well, wait, other people have had other life experiences, and gosh, I can learn from that. That turned out okay. All these things that give us the confidence to be able to say, I can lean into this change. I can do this. No, I love it. And I think I just want to promise from you that you'll be willing to come back and visit me again later so we can hear about the next pivot after you do get back from a month or so on the road with 3 boys under the age of 10. And at some point, inevitably, I think you are going to spill that black water on your shoes. And I think I know what the euphemism black water is, but I don't want to know. And I don't think the listener wants to know either. I'm super convinced that the outcome here, that the next pivot and the pivot after that will continue to be successful. And what I'm taking away from this conversation is a lot of inspiration personally about the ability to just confidently lean into change, make the change, big company, small company, career hiatus, different career. I think that the confidence that builds, the use of that risk tolerance muscle, and again, what you said, the minute you use the word confidence, you use the word humility, I think so important here in the yin yang of making these changes. Dan, I'm really grateful for you spending the time with us today, and I wish you a wonderful trip and real success in the next pivot. Thank you so much.
Dave, I really appreciate the invite. This is a lot of fun. And I will say, definitely, I plan to come back once I have a destination for my pivot, and maybe the listeners have put a pin on taking any advice from me until they know if it worked out or not. So I'd be happy to return and give an update when I have one.
Fantastic. I take advice from you any day. Thank you, Dan. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks a lot, Dave.
And that'll do it for another episode of Coming About. If you like the show, please take a moment to subscribe so you'll get notified when we release new episodes. And if you have a moment, I'd love it if you left us a review so that other folks like yourself can learn about the show. I look forward to speaking with you next time.
This has been Coming About. We hope these conversations have left you feeling empowered and ready to take your organization to the next level. To speak with Dave about your business transformation or to learn more about Health Monitor Network, go to healthmonitornetwork.com. And don't forget to check out his book, Coming About, How We Transformed a Major Media Company and the Lessons There for You. Available wherever books are sold. Coming About with David Paragamian is a production of Advantage Audio.